Hello there, Chris Eddy here with you for another edition of VLGA Connect. Good to have you with us. A big edition today. We're going to get to that big story out of Hepburn Shire in a moment, the governance crisis that just seems to get deeper with each passing day. Tony Raunic will take us through what's happening there and what's likely to happen next. And later, we head down to Tasmania to talk to the CEO of West Tamar Council, Kristen Desmond. That council recently became the first in the state to develop its strategic plan with the unapologetic use of AI. But first up, let's take a look at what's making news this week. On Connect News this week, the governance crisis deepening at Hepburn Shire. Stonington self-reports a $600,000 payroll bungle. Two councils now taking the state government to the Supreme Court. And we remember a Greater Bendigo councillor who died just weeks into the job. But we start in Hepburn Shire, where a governance crisis has escalated sharply. Three more councillors, Shirley Cornish, Leslie Hewitt and Pat Hockey, have been automatically stood down after being served with criminal charges by the same private individual behind earlier action against the council. It follows the stand down of Mayor Tony Clark on the 10th of July and Councillor Don Henderson back in March. Chief Executive Bradley Thomas remains in his role, having been charged in that same March action. That means 5 of Hepburn's 7 councillors are now stood down, leaving just 2 able to sit and no quorum to hold a meeting of any kind. We'll take a closer look at what's happening at Hepburn and what's likely to happen next, plus the broader implications for the sector, with Tony Raunic from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers very shortly. In other news, the City of Stonington has self-reported a major payroll error to the Fair Work Ombudsman after an internal review uncovered underpayments dating back to April 2019. Chief Executive Dale Dixon says a system glitch affecting overtime and penalty rate calculations was to blame. Council expects the bill for back pay and interest to reach around $600,000. All affected former and current staff are being contacted directly with personalised advice, and former employees with queries can reach the council by email. 2 councils are now fighting the state government in the Supreme Court over planning decisions. Borondara Council has launched a judicial review proceeding against Planning Minister Sonia Kilkenny over the fast-tracked approval of a $520 million 18-storey development in Kew. The council argues the decision was legally unreasonable, with a key dispute centring on a developer proposal to upgrade adjoining council land it doesn't actually control. That action follows Bayside City Council, which last month launched its own Supreme Court proceedings to try and force the state government to release documents explaining how it selected activity centres for planning overhauls that bypass normal public notice and allow increased building heights. An internal AI roadmap developed for Merribeck Council has drawn fire from the ASU over a lack of consultation and fears of job losses. The Brunswick Voice reported the consultant-authored blueprint outlines 27 potential use cases for automation, from routine document drafting to AI-assisted town planning and predictive revenue modelling. New CEO Kate McCackey has defended the plan as a standard exploration of emerging technology, but the union wants it paused pending community and workforce consultation. The City of Yarra has voted to end its 6-year share e-bike trial with Lime, declining to award the operator a permanent contract. Councillors said Lime failed to meet basic standards and didn't do enough to stop footpath blockages, bike dumping or people riding while drunk. Lime now has 30 days to remove its fleet from the municipality. The Victorian Coalition has promised to scrap the state's mandatory 4th household recycling bin if elected. Under the opposition's plan, local councils would regain the power to decide their own waste management systems, bypassing the state's purple-lidded glass bin directive. The coalition also intends to review and potentially expand the state's container deposit scheme. This policy announcement follows a joint campaign by some 35 councils, which found that 83% of surveyed residents oppose the mandated glass-only bin due to rising setup and household costs. Some good news from Bass Coast Shire, where the Burnaneet Community Arts and Cultural Hub in Cowes has officially received Passive House certification, the first public building in Australia to house a theatre, library, gallery and museum under one Passive House certified roof. It's only the second facility of its kind anywhere in the world, hitting an air tightness result of 0.6 air changes per hour and doing it within its approved budget. Sad news to bring you from the city of Greater Bendigo, where Councillor Donna Nicholas has died. Councillor Nicholas was elected to represent the Lockwood ward at an April by-election and attended her first council meeting in May. Mayor Thomas Prince and CEO Andrew Cooney have remembered her enthusiasm and genuine commitment to community and her natural way with residents, fellow councillors and staff. Councillor Nicholas is survived by her husband Drew, son Cody and granddaughter Stella. Our condolences go to her family, friends and colleagues at Greater Bendigo. And briefly, that by-election has now been scheduled. By-elections to fill vacancies in Banyule and Greater Bendigo are set for October, running alongside the previously announced Mornington Peninsula Shire poll. And that takes the number of current VEC-run by-elections to 6, with 3 more, Wyndham, Kingston and Latrobe, due to conclude later this month. That is VLGA Connect News for this week. For more news from across the local government sector in Victoria and beyond, make sure you listen to the Local Government News Roundup podcast, sponsored by the VLGA and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, as we mentioned at the top of the show, there's really only one story that everyone's talking about in local government, not just in Victoria. I suspect this is being watched closely from all across Australia, what's happening at Hepburn Shire Council. We want to take a deep dive into what's actually happening here, what is likely to happen next, and who better to help us with that than Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Hi, Tony.
Oh, what a week, Chris. What a,
What a week
what
indeed. Can I
impactful
confess
week.
to the audience that we had pre-recorded a segment for you this week on some conduct matters, and we've dumped that. But
Yep.
the other
Thrown that
element
away.
of that is that we jinxed your team. Their unbeaten run came to an end at the hands of the Mighty Hawks. So let's just put that to one
Yeah,
side
let's not
and
talk
come
about
back.
that one.
All right. So Hepburn Shire, we've talked about it in the news. There's been lots of coverage.
Mm,
Major news outlets are talking about how
mm.
this private prosecution action has brought one council to its knees effectively. How do you sum this up, Tony? What's actually happened here?
Oh, well, one solitary individual, Chris, has managed to, use a legal mechanism that's available to him, but essentially completely undermine democracy and local governance in Hepburn Shire. And why this is, as you say, so there's so much interest
Mm,
across the sector in Victoria, across Australia, perhaps even further than that, is that don't for a minute think that there aren't other individuals out there who are likely to consider using a process like this to basically frustrate democracy. There are a lot of individuals who are become angry, aggrieved with decisions of their local council. In this instance, the individual who has brought all these private prosecutions, a local business person, has a long-standing, well-known grievance against the council in relation to a planning permit application that was refused. It's on the public record. There's litigation in relation to it. And, we have to see these private prosecutions in the context of that, Chris.
right. So we know about the initial action, which saw Don
Mm,
Henderson have to stand down. The CEO was involved in that as well. He didn't have to stand down, but he has since resigned. We
mm,
then had this week 2 more very interesting developments, or very late
mm.
last week. The mayor was caught up in a new action, and now, of course, 3 more councillors, meaning a loss of quorum.
That this is right. So the council can no longer operate, perform its usual functions of meeting, making formal decisions and determinations. And in fact, there's a process now where the minister must go ahead and appoint an administrator
Right.
for that council. But what struck me, Chris, is there's been lots of media on this,
Yeah.
and the instigator, the person behind making these charges, and other, commentators, other sort of organisations that, are saying that they're out there representing the interests of local government. A number of them have said things like, well, it's the fault of the government in the legislation. Mr. Penman's just holding elected officials accountable. It's the fault of the government that the implications are this stand down, and therefore the inability of the council to maintain, democracy, representation by elected officials. Again, does anyone seriously think that these charges would have been brought if they didn't have this implication of causing this havoc?
I think that's a fair question. The council certainly has described it as a purposeful manipulation of the legislation.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I'd say anyone who cheers this on from the sidelines, you can't claim to be, a supporter of local democracy, a defender of, local government, because, this we cannot support these sort of actions by individuals. And there is a solution that's available, but it's not just the solution that's sitting there in terms of a local government amendment bill, because there's a number of shortcomings in that bill in relation to these
Yeah.
issues, Chris. Yeah.
Let's come back to that. I'm interested in the process that's
Yep.
followed here. Someone asked
Mm.
me, well, what does it cost to bring these sorts of charges? It's not a high bar to get over,
Yeah,
is it?
and again, in some of the commentary, it's like, oh, this has been through a filter at the magistrate's court. What happens is, an individual can go into the magistrate's court, go up to the registry, and provided they've filled out a form, filled out the right sections of a form, have signed it correctly, can establish that they are who they say they are, then the form gets stamped at the registrar by a clerk, and you pay something like $25 per
Wow.
charge, Chris.
So
There
for
is
a
no,
hundred for $125, you can bring a
Mm,
council to its knees.
yeah, yeah. And there's just not, when we look at, other charges being laid by the police, by the DPP, um, by other law enforcement organizations, there's a filter that they go through as to whether, is there enough of a case here that we think there'll be a prima facie arguable case in a
Mm.
court. That's the filter that it goes through, not, an AI generated, make up a claim for me, please, chat GPT or whatever it is,
And that's what you suspect's happening here.
Yeah,
There's
probably,
systems
mate,
of
perhaps
AI.
even more than a suspicion based on some of my experiences with this stuff, Chris. Yeah.
Right. So, Tony, what about the council's claims that there's nothing wrong with the process they use to adopt its budget? Because I believe that's behind these last three charges, isn't it? It's not lost on anyone that the only two councillors that didn't vote for the budget are the only two that are still able
Yeah.
to sit, although that's another question we'll
Yeah.
get to in a minute.
So my understanding, you're right, that these latest charges at least relate to the resolution on the 30th of June of this year, of council to adopt the annual budget for next year. And the issue in the charges, the issue that's been raised in the charges is that some of the financial statements, the final versions of those statements were not before the councillors at the time they passed that resolution. Now, what the CEO, Bradley Thomas of the council, has indicated to councillors on the night before they passed this resolution in answer to a question, and subsequently statements on the council website, are that the council's obtained independent advice to support this, that that the council is merely following a well understood process, a process that has been followed in the past, whereby that you adopt the budget as advertised with particular changes, and it's just an administrative exercise to make those changes to financial statements. Now,
Right.
that's the position put by the council executive. My understanding is that it is consistent with what occurs at many councils and has occurred on many prior occasions. Whether it's consistent with section 94(2)A, which is the section of the Local Government Act that talks about adopting a budget with financial statements in a particular form. I think that's an open question, but it's not a reason, I think, to deal with this by way of private prosecution.
But doesn't that, perhaps I'm missing a point
Mm.
here, doesn't that suggest that the council, once making its final resolution on the budget, can't make any changes? Surely that doesn't flow through.
I think the suggestion being is that, whatever the changes council wants to be made, the suggestion is that the changes need to be, have been made to the financial statements already and have them sitting in front of the councillors when they make the resolution, rather than saying adopt the budget with a change to be made, tomorrow, next week, etc.
So doesn't that preclude the council being able to make a change on the night?
Yeah,
Isn't that predetermined?
essentially it says you need to physically make all those changes to the documentation, including, so we're talking about a
Yeah,
balance sheet, a statement of capital expenditure. We're talking about those sort of standard accountancy type documents,
yeah.
that, to be fair, Councillor Brian Hood suggested on the night, well, let's just wait a few days. Let's get those statements revised. And if that advice or that suggestion from Councillor Hood, I should say, had been taken, we presumably wouldn't have had this ground that was
Right.
used for the private prosecution. But what would then have occurred is that we would have had a situation where the council wouldn't have adopted its budget within
Yeah,
the time frame
yeah.
set out in the legislation, would have had to go to the Auditor General or whoever it is they go to in these instances and say, look, we're adopting late for these reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
My point here, though, Chris, is please, this is important. I still think that if this budget had been passed with all the the formalities that the councillors who voted against it wanted,
Mm.
would likely have seen some other set of charges in weeks and months to come. Because
Right. So
I
you
think that
think,
there's a cause on here
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
create havoc at that particular shire.
So there's been some widespread condemnation of this, as you say, out leading the pack with calls for urgency and some specific suggestions to the government is Rural Councils Victoria, the alliance of which Hepburn Shire is a member. Let's hear about what their position is. I had a chat earlier today with Councillor Rob Amos, who's the chair of RCV. Let's have a listen to a bit of what his thinking is on this issue.
That's right, and this could very easily be weaponised to shut down a planning decision or whatever. And the fact that, and the clause in the Local Government Act, we actually agree with. So the idea behind it is if someone, for example, got charged with murder or a very serious crime, then they rightly should have to stand down as a council until that matter is resolved, and we actually agree with that. But I guess no one saw this loophole, and when the legislation was being put in place, and to see how it has been weaponised and could further be weaponised is really disturbing.
So you've called pretty urgently for the government to act here. What do you want to see happen as a matter of priority?
Two things. So they are looking at changing that legislation, and that is due to happen soonish. We are calling on that to happen next week. It should be separated out from the main bill, that the amendments that they're doing to the Local Government Act, and this should just be this section should be. I think they come back from their winter break on Tuesday, and I think that should happen straight away. The second part is that it should be referred to the DPP, and this does have history of these prosecutions being referred to the DPP in the past for different people, and we think the DPP should go and look at these straight away to see whether there is anything in them. If there is stuff in there, prosecute them. We don't have a problem with that. But if there is nothing, then they should be moved on.
Yeah, so assess it on its merits, and if there's no merit, deal with it. But as you say, if there is a case to be heard, proceed with it. But doing it privately is not the way, in your view.
That's correct. And citizens and residents and ratepayers, absolutely. If there is an issue, they should. There is a complaints process. Every single council has a complaints process to go through, and if they're not happy with their results, there's a process to move along to escalate that process. Jumping straight to a private prosecution is not the way to be doing this.
Rob, are you aware of this potentially happening anywhere else? Has there been talk about it?
Not that I've heard of at this stage.
No. Okay. So it's just a risk at this point that we want to make sure can't occur again to the extent that it's happened at Hepburn, correct?
That's correct. And it's not a rural council's issue. It's obviously happened to one of our member councils, and so we made the decision to get right behind them to try and get this sorted out for them as soon as possible. Really, the biggest thing to look at is so their community has elected democratic representation. That's really what this is about.
Have you had any response from anyone in the government since your statement?
Not directly, no.
No. Okay. All right. Let's keep in touch. If you do hear something, we'd love to know about it. And thanks for taking a lead on this very important governance issue.
Thanks, Chris.
So, Tony, Rob Amos there out front calling for action here. What do you make of his suggestion that the Attorney General should be straight on the phone to the DPP, urging him to take a look at this himself? Him or her? I don't know who the DPP is.
It's a he, and absolutely 100% endorse that. But let me say, I think that the response from the state government and from the new local government minister, Paul Hamer, has been, disappointing, weak, tepid, inadequate.
Yeah.
The statements that I've read are not from the minister, from a spokesperson from the minister saying, we've written we're concerned, firstly, well, what an understatement, but we're writing to the DPP to bring these matters to the DPP's attention. Well, Chris, the DPP is well aware of these.
This has been mentioned in court, I believe.
Well, in terms of the charges laid against Councillor Henderson and indeed, other staff at council, including the CEO and the former manager of stat planning, there are separate legal representatives for all those individuals. Each of the separate legal representative firms have written to the DPP in relation to those charges laid back in March. The magistrate in open court has called on the DPP to step in, exercise the DPP's discretion to take this one over, and presumably then do that examination Rob Amos referred to and consider, is there a prima facie case? Is there an arguable case here? The DPP hasn't done that, presumably because they're under-resourced or some other reason. But, Chris, so bringing it to the DPP's attention is insufficient. We need to know that this bill, firstly, the bill that we've got at the moment, as the RCV and Rob Amos observed, there's an immediate urgent issue here, which is the Section 229 stand-down issues. Having this omnibus bill where we've got much more controversial elements in the bill, like the Fair Jobs Code, which is essentially making it difficult for councils to use external contractors, etc. We need to just deal with something that seems to have broad support across the political spectrum, and that is that we need to fix this issue with stand downs. We need to make that element of the bill retrospective, because
I was going to ask you that. Is that
Yep.
something that ordinarily does happen with legislation? Can it be?
Well, ordinarily it's not. There is retrospective legislation, and this happens from time to time. And the argument against retrospective legislation, of course, is that it should be used rarely in rare instances, because how can something become illegal or the law be changed, after the event?
Yeah.
We can only expect it to know the law that it applies at the time. But in this instance, there's often legislation that's put in place to rectify an anomaly. And that's essentially what's happening here, to rectify a situation.
Right.
That ought to be the case. So the government rushes through legislation on the last day of a sitting on occasions. We've seen from all political persuasions that occur, there's no reason why the government couldn't get this as a discrete bill through the House on an urgent basis, dealing simply with the uncontroversial elements of that local government amendment bill. They
So Tony, let
do that.
me bring you back to where you were going a little bit earlier.
Yep.
The notion that an administrator must be appointed. You believe it's incumbent on the minister, as the legislation is worded?
Yeah, so Section 232 of the local government actually says that where there's it turns its mind to this scenario where there needs to be a temporary administration because there's multiple extraordinary vacancies amongst councillors. And in that instance, so if at least 50% of the council positions are vacant, tick here, and if the minister's reasonably satisfied that those vacancies could restrict the ability of the council to provide good governance, well, having two councillors, no quorum, clearly that's the case, then the minister it's not a discretion thing, must recommend to the governor in council appointment of an administrator. Now, then what happens after that, Chris? And this is an interesting element to this, and Rhys Thomas has written, our friend Rhys Thomas has written about some of this on LinkedIn and other places. So the administrator has the ability under Section 233 then to invite or request councillors who have been suspended, stood down, whatever the situation is, to become members of a delegated committee.
Right.
So what we could effectively have potentially is the existing stood down Hepburn Shire councillors and those two additional councillors, Councillor Hood and is it Councillor Riley? Yep.
Yes.
Who could to join a delegated committee that essentially performs the tasks that a council would normally perform. You know, considering.
So you'd effectively end up with all of those councils back around the table making the decisions with the additional cost of an administrator.
That's right. That's right. So there is a path there, and I think that's probably where we will end up, Chris. There's obviously the government need to identify an administrator and move on that. But what just annoys me is just that it's been left to like organisations like the RCV to speak about this, and the local government minister should be out there condemning this, talking about proactive steps rather than just having brought it to the attention of some other body. It's, you and I have worked this out by just picking up the act and reading it in 5 minutes. Like there's a whole, the resources the government have on this. It's just.
I agree. It's the almost virtual silence is very disappointing. One can only hope that there's lots of work going on behind the scenes to deal with this, because we don't want to see it get to the point that you intimated earlier could potentially happen. Just one thing I want to just check. I'm not sure you went into detail. That Section 223 also means that two non-stood down councillors would in effect be suspended as well with the appointment of an administrator.
Yeah, so just to, and I might have said the section number wrong. That's maybe where you got it. It's Section 232, and then Section 2. So 232 says minister must appoint a temporary administrator. In this instance, 233 goes on to say that any non-stood down councillors, i.e. Councillor Hood and Dryly, then are suspended on the full council allowance. Then it gives this option there for the administrator to ask at least the suspended councillors, at least, to join this delegated committee. I haven't seen this provision used before, and maybe there's a question as to whether the stood down councillors can join the committee or not, but as a minimum, councillors Hood and Dryly could certainly join with an administrator. If it's a 3-person delegated committee, we've seen these things work.
Away we go. All right. Of course, who would take that on as an administrator remains to be seen. Where I'm checking my email, checking the sources to make sure there's been no announcement while we've been talking, and there has not, as far as I can tell. So what do you think will happen next week? Is it next week that the bill is back before the Parliament?
It's yes, it is next week. It is, and I think that, well, there are the government doesn't have the numbers in the upper house, but they typically get the support of the independents with a bit of, dealing. And so one would think that the bill is going to pass, but we need, as I say, it needs to have that retrospective application. And I suggest we could rush through this bill with likely support, I would think, of the government, the opposition, the Greens, likely the independents as well, if it just simply dealt with this Section 229 issue and leave the controversial elements for further debate. I mean, the Fair Jobs Code stuff hasn't been...
That was going to be my question, because I noticed one of the comments I did hear out of the MAV was that they believe there was elements of that bill on which more work needed to be done. So they could pull out the Section 229 issue and deal with that separately. Is that what you're suggesting?
Absolutely, they could do that. And there's no doubt that there are controversial elements in that bill, and a number of sector organisation representatives have come out and said, look, there hasn't been consultation on this Fair Jobs Code stuff. It's been discussed with the Australian Service Union, I gather, from the media reports, but the sector hasn't had an opportunity to debate the impact of this limitation on using external consultants.
All right, well, that is just so interesting for governance nerds, and for everyone else. It's one of the biggest stories we've had to unpack in quite some time, if not in the whole time we've been doing VLGA Connect. So thank you, Tony. I know you've put a lot of effort into the detail there. We'll keep an eye on it, and I suspect you'll be back in the not too distant future to talk about next steps.
Always a pleasure, Chris.
Tony Raunic from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, our sponsors, with us here today on VLGA Connect. Well, in May, West Tamar Council in Tasmania released its draft community strategic plan, a 10-year plan, and you're thinking, well, that's not that special. All councils do that. Well, yes, indeed, that is the case. But this one's been prepared in a way that no council in Tasmania has tried before. It, rather than following the traditional planning processes, used artificial intelligence to help research and synthesise the huge volume of federal, state and local strategies, along with community feedback that shaped the plan. So we thought we'd find out a bit more about what I think is going to be more regular across the local government sector. Who's our trailblazer? Well, it's Kristen Desmond, who is the CEO of West Tamar Council in Tasmania. Great to have you on VLGA Connect, Kristen. Welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here with you telling this story. You've been working with, I must confess up front, a friend of mine, Stephen Yarwood, former Lord Mayor of Adelaide, now bills himself as an urban futurist, on this AI development of the plan. Why did you decide to go down this path?
Look, it was really interesting as we're working through AI, and Stephen had worked with our council on trying to get a vision for a particular industrial park that we're trying to get up. And we had some difficulty in trying to get everybody on the same page. So they got a little taste of what AI could do, but it was using Stephen in terms of his strategic approach and also his understanding of being a planner and his previous experience of being the Lord Mayor of Adelaide. Yeah. So those things were what kind of brought it together. What was really fascinating for me was when we were talking to Stephen about potential options here, he said, hey, I've got this idea and I'd really like to trial it somewhere.
Right. And would you be my guinea pig?
Yes. Would you be my guinea pig? And I'm like, well, we could do that. And what is fundamental to making this work is having a council that is willing to go, yes, we'll back you and have a go. Because, again, we talk about it not being done anywhere in Tasmania. I don't think it's been done anywhere in Australia this way. And so it was all about how do we get better efficiency. So in Tasmania, we're kind of a medium-sized council. In your Victorian level, we would be a small council. I've got a budget of around $45 million. I've got 119 FTE, and we've got 26,000 residents. So in the grand scheme of things, we're small. I can't afford in my budget to be spending upwards of $100,000 on a strategic plan because we just don't have the budget for it. And the document, if people, when it gets hopefully adopted very shortly, we'll see this is not a plan that, or it is a plan that would match large city councils. We've done a lot of work on it. And the premise of this was, can we do it in a short period of time with an efficiency in terms of cost and time and getting more depth to our plan and get a quality plan? Will it work? It won't it work? So part of my philosophy is if we're going to do something, fail fast, right? So don't spend a year and a half on it and then go, oh, actually, this isn't going to work. So the premise was, could we get it done in 6 months?
Right. And did you?
So that is, we can, including a month out for community consultation.
Yeah. So talk us through what the AI was actually used for and how.
Yeah, so AI, you have to be really careful with it. One of the first questions I asked Stephen was, how are you going to make sure that hallucinations don't happen? I know enough about AI to be dangerous without knowing too much about it. And what we were able to work through, and this is where the unique part of this structure is it was used as a second brain. It did not draft the document. The drafting of the document was done by Stephen as the consultant. What we wanted was 10 days of consultancy only. That's all we were paying for, and that's all that Stephen had agreed. Of course, it was a trial. It was locked down. So if it took more time, then that was an economic risk for him. If it didn't work, that was our small economic risk. The way it worked is it synthesized information a whole lot quicker. So we did 60 strategic plans, both of council key strategic plans of our regions and of our states. Now that 60 was done in a matter of weeks, as opposed to if I'd given that to a consultant to look at 60, we'd still be waiting 12 months in for them to come up with that information. Then we did 7 targeted community workshops where Stephen was here. It was done in about 3 days, and that was synthesized individually per workshop, which means you get the results back much quicker, and then as a group it was synthesized. Now, neither one of those 2 pieces actually came together at that point. So the point of doing this is you actually have them in blocks. So one's not influencing the other. It is simply, this is this one, this is this one. Then those were synthesized together. Now, all of that is actually being tracked by a very small project group. So we were checking. So there was always human checking over the top.
This is the human oversight question. I know you've been very clear about the need for all of that interpretation, judgment, final drafting, staying with people. Were you trying to get ahead of community concerns with that, or your own concerns?
I think I'm pretty conservative around it. I know it's there. I know we have to embrace it. I've done a lot of professional development that says pick something and do it. The thing that made this work is it wasn't just the AI, but it was the consultant who did it. So Stephen has local government experience. He understands local government. If I'd picked someone who had no local government experience, this would have been a much more difficult get. But it is, for me, it was about making sure that people were at the centre. If our community is not at the centre, there's no point doing a really good community strategic plan because it's not worth the name. So for me, it was about, it had to stay humanised because otherwise anyone can put in a prompt and get a plan and it's not really fit for our community, and that's not fair on our community. So we really needed to make sure that this was focused. But in order to keep AI from going into other places, each bit had a distinct lock so that it wasn't being influenced by other parts of the process. So it's quite complicated in some ways. So
but these are the you're talking about the sort of the parameters that are put around each step that Stephen would have designed into the AI tool that was being used.
Yeah, that's right. So it's each locked so that one can't influence something else. So you're getting purely the synthesis of documents and getting purely community consultation feedback without the two getting mixed. So
Yeah.
it is about
Because
keeping them separate.
AI engines can tend to go off and look for its own supporting information, and that's where it comes up sometimes with
That's
inaccuracies or
right.
those hallucinations. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly right.
Gotcha.
And these were closed loops, so it wasn't going out into the ether to look at anything outside of the sources that were provided. And those sources, again, were checked by people. And we provided all of the strategic documents, for example, that we wanted. I've read through every one of the workshop outcomes to make sure that they're correct. And I went to every one of those workshops so that we could make sure it was right. The strategic plan was then checked against some of those other key documents that were there. It went to council for review, and really interesting, first time around council went, oh, it sounds like we're telling people a bit too much. Tone isn't right. So again, we went back and we said, okay, Stephen, you can do some work with AI to change the tone. It comes back with very specific recommendations. Humans looked at it. We redid what we thought worked, went back to council, and they were happy with it. So it was constant check and constant wash and repeat. And Stephen used more than one AI model to put it through. So it was really checking it through another checking module. And all of these things were set up at the beginning. So it wasn't by chance. It was about how do we maintain that AI does the grunt work. So it does the second brain stuff. It does the synthesis, but humans have the final touch. Humans make decisions about what's in and what's out. And that's where this last piece of community consultation has been really important, because the community needs to read it and be comfortable it reflects them, and it isn't a generic document that could be picked up and moved to another municipality, because if that was what we got, then we weren't getting what we were asking for.
We'll come back to the consultation side in just a moment, because I know it's now closed for consultation. But in terms of the final product that you put out for consultation, how well did it match your expectations, or were you surprised?
I was surprised at how well the process went and the quality of the product that we got, because I probably was a little bit cynical about the quality that we were going to get, because it'd never been done before. I wasn't quite sure what we were going to get, but I thought it was worth the risk. I think I've said to people before, when you're the first to do something, it means stepping out on a limb and seeing whether it'll work. And we did, and I'm really happy with the quality that we've got back. So again, we've done the physical graphic design of it with our normal graphic design person, so it fits and feels and smells like a West Tamar corporate document. We got the words. Again, it does the synthesis, it does the words, it doesn't do necessarily the look and feel outside of the tone that's in it. So there is real human outcomes here. But as I said at the beginning, I think this matches things that large capital city councils can do without being on a large capital city budget.
So you've saved time, you've saved money, you've used your resources more efficiently to produce this. If you were to set your plan up against any other council plan, not necessarily a big city one, would somebody looking at it think it's any different in terms of a typical council strategic plan?
I think ours, and this is going to sound really weird, is more human.
Right.
And I
Okay.
know it
You've used
sounds
AI
weird.
to produce a more human output.
I know, because it isn't AI speak, it is human language, and it is about, so some of the pillars we've got are things like our heart, our economy, those things, our environment. It is about us. And that's where fundamentally I think it's been different, because and council were very particular about these pillars of, what does our heart mean? What does that look like? That's about our community. It's not about making it us and them. It is about saying it's all of us. And those sorts of words were very particularly chosen. But those themes were part of the things that came out of the original synthesis of all of the strategic documents. It's actually slightly, I would say, more creative than I was expecting it to be. And it was certainly more efficient, because we were able to, through all of the different feedback, it was able to nail really quickly what the key theme should be. And when we're reading through, a first draft of the work that Stephen had done and AI had done, there weren't that many changes that we were seeking to make. And to me, that says the process worked.
Yeah. I do like those three things: our shape, our heart, our economy. I hadn't heard it put like that before, so I think there is a bit of uniqueness to that, Kristen. What has your community thought about it after the consultation period?
So it was really interesting. You may have, seen a bit of media about the fact that we were doing it. And it was funny on social media, we got a lot of course, they're using AI, can't they? What kind of specialty are we employing here if they can't even do it themselves? That kind of stuff. But those that took the time to give feedback primarily have said thank you for taking the time to do it. It actually does match what we're thinking. And the key feedback has been around our environment, which is really important to our community, and around planning. And that's the tensions that we have with any document, because we've got a planning scheme that doesn't necessarily allow us to do some of the things that our community has asked us to look at. But we knew we had 500 people come have a look at the page. We only got 17 submissions, and that tells me the bulk of people were happy. Out of those 17 submissions, only a couple of them were negative. The majority of them, and the one I like to quote the best, is one that said, I wasn't sure I should read it because I thought it might not be very good, but I'm really glad I did, because actually it was much better than I thought it would be. Could you just do a little bit here?
Yeah, so with some actual constructive feedback.
Yeah, well, it was. And look, what was really fascinating, and I think this is the bit of AI that's good because it doesn't come with personal bias, is that when the feedback was synthesized and we got that report, it didn't go, oh, I don't agree with that. What we got was, this is what we heard, this is how you could change it. And then humans, and we've just been to council saying, would you like to adopt that change or not? But here's the basis on which you'd done it. Whereas I think if we had a human doing it, they would have discounted some of those things. And it certainly would have taken them a lot longer. So I think objectively, it's good because it tests you. As a group, as a very small project team, and I was part of it deliberately to make sure that we actually made this the best it could be, you had to take a devil's advocate approach. We had to challenge everything and not just accept that what we were getting was right.
Yeah. Well, congratulations for taking the step. I wonder how much pressure you've felt as a reasonably new CEO. I think you're 3 years in the role there and just 5 years in the sector, and your background's a whole another story. Do you feel like you're sort of out the front looking to see if anyone's going to follow you on this?
Look, I think there's certainly been a lot of interest in Tasmania about whether this would work. So I've talked about it being a lot less. Without giving away numbers, it would be a fifth of the cost of what other councils do. If you're going to produce something at the breadth that we've gone to. So, yes, I think we are out in front. One of the things in our current strategic plan for West Tamar is to be leading the local government sector. So I'm kind of saying to council, well, tick, I think we're doing that.
Have you documented all those steps that you took? Because it occurs to me that could also be a revenue stream for you. You might be able to sell that on to other councils.
And look, importantly, all of the IP in relation to this project is owned by us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these things are really important. But I guess for me, it's about trying to say to our community, you don't have to be afraid of AI. It can actually help us. But I'm also trying to send the message to our council staff that it's not going to take their jobs away. This is about I use this a little bit. You can do smart AI or lazy AI. If you think you can just put a prompt in and get something and we're all going to be okay with that, that's not necessarily the type of staff I want working here. What we got was people who were sharper and looking for very specific things and being able to learn. So the learning we got out of how to use it better has been huge too, in terms of understanding what good prompts look like. How do you refine it? What does it look like? Stephen went so far as to mark his own homework against AI, which is a Stephen thing to do, right? So for us, it was about making us better. And this for me is about saying to our community, it's not about being afraid of it, and saying to my staff, it's not about actually you losing your jobs. This is about making you smarter and getting better efficiencies so that we can actually do more for our community with the money that we've got, because it's not going to stretch forever.
Well, it's a great story. Congratulations to you and your team, and to Stephen for what you've managed to achieve through this. You'd welcome calls, contact from other CEOs who might want to find out a bit more from you about how you went about it.
Absolutely. Always happy to share the success stories.
Terrific. All right, let's open the floodgates. VLGA Connect listeners at least might be in touch. Kristen, thank you so much for your time and for outlining all of that for us. A great story, as I said, and congratulations to you. Hope we can talk again.
No worries. Thanks, Chris.
Kristen Desmond, who is the CEO of West Tamar Council in Tasmania. Now, before we go, a little bit of news from the VLGA, which held an extraordinary board meeting last week, and there's a new president. Councillor Jane Carslake from Glen Iris City Council has been elected to the president position. Councillor Janet Pearce from Macedon Ranges has been reappointed as vice president. And following the end of Rita Harris's term on the Governance and Risk Committee last month, Mike Blake has been appointed as the chair of that committee. Congratulations to those office bearers and best wishes for your term in those roles at the VLGA. The VLGA has also developed its Year 2 Councillor Professional Development Program, offering a range of delivery methods, including fast-paced one-hour online modules to the more intensive half-day sessions that enable you to do a deep dive into aspects of the councillor role. If you want someone to do the thinking for you and design a program that responds directly to the unique needs of your council, that's delivered in a way that suits you, contact the VLGA today. To find out more, you can view the full Year 2 Councillor Professional Development Prospectus on the VLGA website. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening and watching VLGA Connect. Thanks to Hunt & Hunt Lawyers, our sponsors, and we hope to see you back again next week for more VLGA Connect. Until then, bye for now.